We are going to continue with our zoo example, and I want to go back to the class diagram and just reiterate that our subclass or our parent class is going to be animal, and we have two subclasses. So we are actually going to show how to create the mammal subclass, and eventually we are also going to show how to make what the animal class, what would be called an abstract base class, where we won't actually ever create any animals directly. We will only create mammals and reptiles. And then we will illustrate some polymorphism when we get to that point. Right now, we are just going to concentrate on the mammal class, and I will also show a few more industry standards for creating and or writing classes that are frequently used. We now switched over to the animal class, and one of the industry standards that's often used is to use an underscore with the class level variables. And the reason for that is then it's a little bit easier to tell when you're coding and working with the code that those are your class level variables. And so I'm going to attempt to go through and go ahead and use that type of formatting throughout so you can kind of see that. And at this point, I also want to remind you that we used protected here on the base class so that our subclasses would be allowed to access those variables. Our methods will all stay public. And let's take a look at the animal.cpp. And what's nice about using that underscore then is if we wanted to name our parameters coming in the same as our class, for example, I'm going to input name and I'm going to input weight, and that makes it a little bit more descriptive variables, then it is easy for me to tell the difference between the parameter variable and my class level variable. The parameter variable does not have an underscore, the class level variable does. And I will need to go ahead and update using the underscore, weight, and total food. And likewise, any place that used the class level variable, I will need to go ahead and change that. This isn't too big of a program, so it's not that big of a deal to make that change. And it's a nice way to set it up. And I really like the fact that here, when you set up your constructor, you can tell the difference between the class level variable and your parameter immediately. Looks like we got one more. That should wrap up the changes there. And we would need to do likewise in reptile. Any place that it uses that class level variable, we don't need to, so temperature is the only new class level variable here. N and W are being passed in as parameters, so we don't need to change anything there. And in our .cpp for reptile, we will need to change these to underscore temperature. Next, we're going to go ahead and write the mammal class. And what's kind of nice about this is we've already created the reptile header file and reptile class. I'm going to copy that code. So Control C for copy, or select all first and then Control C. So Control A to select all, Control C to copy, and I'm going to paste that into the mammal class and then slowly make changes that I might need. So in the mammal class, and again, let's see, we are going to need, it's the class mammal. So this is going to change from reptile to mammal. And it's going to public animal, indicates that it's going to inherit from animal. In the mammal class, we are not going to have any additional instance fields. If you remember what our class diagram looked like, there are no additional instance fields. I need to change reptile to mammal, and we need to show how we are going to use the, or call the superclass constructor. So a mammal is going to have a name, a weight, and no temperature. So we're going to get rid of that. And then I will just call the base class animal constructor, and I don't need to call anything else in my constructor here for a mammal. We do need to have the curly braces. If you don't have the curly braces, it will throw an error. So you do need to have a beginning and ending brace there on the constructor. And then we don't need to change the temperature. And when we feed the mammal, it's going to be the same feed as the base class. Get info will have a little bit of additional information, but get total food will be exactly the same as the base class. So the only thing that's going to be different in the mammal class is we are going to write a little bit of information into the get info method that's going to be slightly different. And so that also removes several other pound includes, and that should be our mammal class. We do want to access the string library here, so I'm just going to use std string, and I'm going to use, and that's probably more of an industry standard to do it this way than not, and so we're going to go ahead and use that. Next, we're going to create mammal.cpp. So we're going to add a new item, and it's going to be a .cpp file. We need to name it the same name as the class, and we'll be able to add code to that. One thing I am going to attempt to do is, if we go, well, let's go back to mammal.h, and we're going to copy the class information into the .cpp file, and some of it we're going to need straight up, some of it we won't. It's not recognizing animal, so we have to pound include animal. That's going to be in quotes. Hit the tab key to fill that in, and we're going to need to pound include mammal.h, and so mammal.h will also need to be pound included here. And then we can create the constructor in the header file like we did, and we could also create the constructor here in the .cpp file. It's probably more recognizable in your mammal.h to use just a prototype line here. So let me show an alternative way to creating that constructor, and maybe making your header file more of a true header file where that only has the prototypes. So if I have the constructor for a mammal, I send it a string and a double, then in the .cpp file, it's going to accept a string and a double, and it's going to call the base class animal. And so that would be probably a better way to set that up, so that your header file has only the prototypes, and then your .cpp file has all of the implementation, is what that would look like. Now, that's for the animal. I meant to go to mammal. And then our get info method here in the .cpp file. A couple of things we're going to have to take a look at, but the get info method, I am just going to add a line of code that's going to output animal type is a mammal. So there will be a slightly different message when we call the get info method for the mammal. We still want to output the get info from the animal class, so we'll do animal get info. So we will call the animal get info, but then we're going to have this additional line of code. And we are using a standard class library count, so std count, in order to get that to work. And it looks like we're getting pretty close to getting this set up. I'm going to test it here a little bit, and make sure that we don't have any errors, and then we will come back. Everywhere that you use a IO stream value, we're going to have to use that STD in front of that just to kind of get you used to that. I went ahead and did some editing and changing some things around, and when I did, found that when I copied and pasted over my class, I forgot to delete out a bunch of stuff, and so I need to remember to delete this information out. We don't need to redefine the class. The error message I got was that the class was redefined. Let me just show that to you. So it says mammal class redefinition. So if you ever come across that error, it was because I was trying to redefine the class. There was also a curly brace here at the bottom that I had to delete out, and that should clean up the mammal class. There's several other little changes that I made. I'll just kind of go through each class just to show that things are cleaned up, and we will see how this runs. So I've got my animal.h, and remember we changed to the underscore weight, underscore name, underscore total food to show those. That looks like it's pretty much the same. Mammal.h, we added a getInfo method, and actually I need to go back because there's one important thing that we haven't been including, and that is a destructor method. Every single class should have a destructor method in it, and the destructor just begins with a tilde, and it's named the same as the class. And with a parens, I've got one pasted here for mammal. I just need to follow the format parens semicolon. And so every class should have a destructor. So we need to do that for animal class. We need to do that for the mammal class. And we need to do that for the reptile class. Change mammal to reptile. Because C++ does not take care of its own memory, we need to include those destructors. The destructors also need to be placed into the .cpp files, and it's usually the last method. So in animal, it's just animal, scope resolution operator, and then the destructor. And likewise in mammal, and likewise in reptile. So you need destructors in all of them. I ran the code and I cleaned up some of the output so it looks like this now. Animal name is Zim, animal type, animal type, animal type. I added that into the reptile class as well on the .cpp right here to indicate the animal type. And last but not least, if we take a look at the driver, I changed one thing in my driver, cleaned up a little bit of the output, but basically I am now, instead of using an animal, using a mammal. So I am no longer creating any animals. I'm only creating mammals and tigers. And from the output, you can see that animal is considered, the Zim is considered a mammal. That was our tiger. And Slither is a reptile for animal type. But even though the word animal is used here, I am no longer creating an actual animal. I'm only creating mammals and tigers, and both mammals and tigers inherit all the characteristics from their base classes. All of this sample code will be uploaded to course sites so you can see all of the changes in case we missed a few, but we got our header file for animal, mammal, reptile, and then we have a .cpp file for animal. That's the one that's most extensive, mammal, and then reptile. And last, our driver. So look for the .cpp files and all of the files to be uploaded to course sites. But that concludes adding a mammal, and also included using the alternative underscore notation and adding std, and then adding the destructors to the classes.